Ain't no name on it, nigga. Get the ball played and get the action. Let's go. Why you got it? Change time.
He asked Chris Paul if he changed up the defensive assignment yesterday. And Chris said, no, I didn't change up the assignment. I just suggested, hey, we might want to have somebody else guarding Klay right now because Kawhi is not warm yet.
A future Hall of Famer got booted from an NBA team in the dead of night. And at 2:40 in the morning, Chris Paul jumped on Instagram to say he just found out he was being sent home. No warning, no meeting, just a late-night shock that hit fast and hard. The media wasted no time flipping the script on him. Almost instantly, Chris Paul was painted as the villain, labeled difficult, called a locker room lawyer, and framed as someone the Clippers just couldn't deal with anymore. But here's the part nobody wanted to touch. Video footage came out that told a totally different story. And once you actually see what Chris Paul was calling out, everything clicks. He wasn't the problem at all, and that truth made people inside that building real uncomfortable. Let's rewind and break down what really went down. The official story sounded clean enough. The Clippers were off to a rough start. Vibes were bad, wins weren't coming. And Chris Paul, being Chris Paul, started holding people to a standard. He questioned coaching calls, challenged the front office, and spoke up about effort on the floor. Apparently, that was too much for the organization to stomach. Enter Lawrence Frank. He flew all the way to Atlanta just to deliver the news face-to-face. Frank later said they were parting ways with Chris Paul, while making sure to say nobody was blaming him for the team's struggles. On the surface, it sounded normal. A veteran clashing with management happens all the time in the NBA. But there's a huge hole in that story. And once you watch the actual game film, once you see what Chris Paul was reacting to in real time, something wild starts to show itself. The Clippers didn't push him out because he was disruptive. They got rid of him because he was exposing something they didn't want exposed. And that something involves their highest paid player. Now, let's talk about the footage that flipped everything upside down. During a game against the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Clippers were down 13 in the fourth quarter. Donovan Mitchell was torching them possession after possession, and the team needed a spark bad. That's when things got real interesting. Chris Paul, a 40-year-old guard whose career is clearly winding down, decided to take the toughest assignment himself. He stepped up to guard Mitchell straight up. Think about that for a second. This is a player everyone says is too slow now. Legs gone, miles on the body, career hanging by a thread. And there he was, fighting over screens, giving full effort, trying to drag his team back into the game by sheer will. Meanwhile, Kawhi Leonard was doing something very different on the other end. After the Clippers scored, Cleveland ran a veteran move. Darius Garland let the ball slowly roll up the court instead of picking it up. When the ball rolls like that, the game clock keeps ticking while the shot clock stays frozen. It's a smart way to burn time when you're ahead. Chris Paul spotted it instantly. He started yelling, waving, telling his teammates to get up and pressure the ball. But Kawhi Leonard just jogged back like it was a walkthrough. No urgency, no hustle, no reaction at all. Garland rolled the ball all the way into the front court untouched. By the time anyone applied pressure, Cleveland had burned 16 seconds for free. Garland then attacked, kicked it out, and the Cavs drilled a three to stretch the lead even more. From start to finish, Cleveland wasted over 30 seconds and got a bucket. All because nobody on the Clippers wanted to sprint back, and somehow it got worse. The very next possession showed the same exact issue. Clippers score. Kawhi starts trotting back again with that same casual jog like the game didn't matter. Garland saw it and let the ball roll again. Why wouldn't he? Nobody was stopping him anyway. Here's the moment that tells you everything. While every other Clipper jogged at half speed, Chris Paul sprinted all the way into the backcourt by himself to shut it down. When the camera panned back, Kawhi wasn't even in the frame. He was that far behind the play. A 40-year-old point guard fighting for his last season showing more urgency than a two-time Finals MVP making over $50 million a year tells you everything you need to know about that locker room. After a dead ball, Chris Paul finally went straight to Kawhi and told him he needed to get up because Cleveland was bleeding the clock on them. The very next possession, Kawhi finally hustled up to pressure the ball, and that raises the real question. If Chris Paul hadn't said anything, would Kawhi have kept jogging the rest of the night? Would anyone else on that roster have had the nerve to call it out? Based on everything we've seen, probably not. And that right there is the real issue with the Los Angeles Clippers. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Kawhi Leonard's defensive reputation versus the reality. Yes, he's got 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards from his San Antonio days, back when he could lock up anybody the Spurs put in front of him. LeBron, Durant, whoever. But what most fans don't realize is that reputations in the NBA last way longer than actual performance. Once you get stamped as an elite defender, people assume you stay that guy forever. The media keeps calling him a two-way superstar. Analysts keep hyping how dangerous he is on both ends. But the numbers tell a different story. Kawhi Leonard hasn't made an all-defensive team since 2021, and his defensive rating last season was the worst of his entire career. And that gap between reputation and reality, that's what Chris Paul exposed. Watching the actual games instead of just peeking at box scores makes makes one thing obvious. The effort has been slipping for years. What you see now is an offense-first player who saves energy on defense and picks his spots. His scoring is still top tier, no debate there. But the idea that he's still some unstoppable two-way monster doesn't survive real scrutiny anymore. And the moment Chris Paul pointed that out, the moment he tried to hold the so-called leader of the team accountable, everything flipped on him. Instead of facing the issue head-on, the organization chose the easier route. Silence the messenger instead of dealing with the message. What really sped up Chris Paul's exit was a direct clash with the coaching staff that went down during a loss to the Dallas Mavericks. This wasn't behind closed doors drama. It happened right in the middle of a game. Kawhi Leonard was struggling defensively against Klay Thompson after checking back in following a rest stretch. He clearly wasn't warmed up and couldn't stay in front of his man. During a fourth-quarter timeout, Chris Paul walked over and asked a simple, logical question. He asked Kawhi if he felt fresh enough and whether he could stick with Klay right now. Kawhi admitted he was struggling. That's when Chris Paul suggested something basic to his teammates. Maybe switch the defensive assignment until Kawhi got his legs back under him. That's normal veteran basketball. That's the kind of adjustment that helps teams win close games. And the Clippers actually made the switch. That's when everything went sideways. The next day, Chris Paul was called into a meeting with assistant coach Jeff Van Gundy on the team plane. Van Gundy asked him directly if he had changed the defensive assignment during the game. Paul explained he didn't officially change anything. He only suggested that someone else guard Klay until Kawhi was ready to take over. The response was ice cold. Van Gundy told him straight up that while he might have had leeway to do things like that elsewhere, he didn't have that leeway in Los Angeles. Let that sink in. A 12-time All-Star, over 20 years in the league, one of the smartest basketball minds in the building, being told he didn't have permission to make common-sense suggestions during a game they were losing. Not long after, Chris Paul posted a cryptic message on social media, just a screenshot of the dictionary definition of the word leeway, with no caption at all. Now we know exactly what that was about. What makes this even more telling is what happened after Chris Paul got sent home. James Harden and Kawhi Leonard both went to the media, acting shocked, saying they had no idea the move was coming. Multiple reports say that wasn't true at all. Sources claimed both Harden and Leonard were tired of Chris Paul constantly pushing accountability. They knew the move was coming. They signed off on it, and they felt relief when it finally happened. When he was gone, the two highest-paid players on the roster watched a teammate get pushed out for calling out real effort issues. Instead of backing him, they let it happen, and maybe even wanted it to happen that way. At first, Kawhi didn't mind Chris Paul's feedback. He respected him as a player and as a person. But over time, that advice started to feel like nagging instead of help coming from someone who wanted to win. Harden, meanwhile, reportedly wasn't fully sold on bringing Paul in from the jump. From their Houston days, he already knew Chris Paul could be tough to work with. Those concerns only grew louder over time. When you zoom out, the picture gets real clear. This locker room is led by stars who value comfort over accountability, peace over pressure, and the organization backed them all the way. And that's why this story isn't just about Chris Paul anymore. It points to a deeper cultural issue that's been quietly eating away at the Los Angeles Clippers from the inside. The Clippers were sitting at 6-18 when they sent Chris Paul home. They had lost 8 of their last 10 games, ranked 25th in defensive rating and 19th on offense. By every number that matters, this team was sinking fast. This wasn't bad luck or a rough stretch. This was failure. Plain and simple. And the wild part, the one guy willing to demand more, the one guy calling out what everyone could clearly see, was the one who got removed from the equation. Accountability didn't get rewarded. It got punished. Nobody else in that locker room was about to check Kawhi Leonard. Everyone else is chasing contracts, chasing extensions, chasing one more year in the league. Nobody wants to be labeled difficult or hard to deal with. Rocking the boat is risky when your future depends on staying quiet. Chris Paul was different. His playing days are coming to an end anyway. He doesn't need another deal. He doesn't need favors. He doesn't need to protect relationships. That gave him freedom. Freedom to say what was actually happening. Freedom to call out effort. Freedom to speak the truth without worrying about consequences. And that freedom made him dangerous. Dangerous to an organization that would rather lose comfortably than win through accountability. Dangerous to stars who prefer peace over pressure. Dangerous to a culture that avoids hard conversations. Now the Clippers are stuck in a brutal spot. Over $50 million owed to Kawhi Leonard next season. James Harden holding a $42 million player option that he's almost certainly going to pick up. Draft picks already sent to Oklahoma City mean they can't even hit reset properly. There's no clean rebuild, no easy exit, no clear direction. The veterans around their stars haven't delivered. The defensive problems are still wide open, and the one voice demanding better is gone. Steve Ballmer poured billions into this franchise. He built a brand new arena. He chased the dream of a championship roster. But the culture that's taken shape says something else. It's a culture where speaking truth to power isn't welcome, where calling out effort gets you shown the door. At the same time, the team is dealing with injuries, chemistry problems, and a fan base that's running out of patience. Every loss slams the window a little more shut. Chris Paul's legacy will always spark debate. He's one of the greatest point guards the game has ever seen. He's also earned a reputation for being tough to play with. And both things can be true at the same time. There's no contradiction there. What nobody can deny is this. When the footage came out, when people saw exactly what Chris Paul was reacting to, the proof was right there. He wasn't exaggerating. He wasn't making things up. He was pointing out real, visible effort problems from players who should absolutely know better. Sometimes the so-called difficult person in the room isn't difficult at all. Sometimes they're just the only honest one, the only one saying what everyone else is thinking, the only one brave enough to say it out loud. Chris Paul walked out of that organization with receipts, and now the whole basketball world can see what he saw. The real question isn't about him anymore. It's whether the Clippers will ever face the real issue, because fixing it would mean uncomfortable conversations with the people making the most money. And based on everything we've seen, that doesn't look likely. Instead, they'll keep losing, keep explaining it away, keep wondering why nothing clicks. Meanwhile, a 40-year-old point guard with 1 foot out of the league showed more hunger to win than players making 10 times his salary. And honestly, that tells you everything about what's truly broken in Los Angeles.